the first question we want to ask you is how you see the health of the democracy in Africa and the perspectives that the democracy can have in the next 10 years. How do you see the future for democracy in the world, in general terms?
Yeah. Africa, because of the colonial history, there's been a good movement in terms of standards governing democratic elections. We have AU standards that have been developed, and those standards are very good. So the difference between good electoral standards and the poor practices, they show that people who are running elections in Africa, they have not been able to fulfill the expectations of African people in terms of having democratic, credible, free, fair elections.
What will you say are like the lessons learned from Africa that you will say we can apply here in Latin America for the strengthening of our democracy?
I think the lessons that you can talk about is that, the manipulation of elections, especially in terms of not having certain procedures that are applied equally, uniformly, independently, impartially. In Africa, we've had a big problem with that, and as a result, election outcomes have been heavily contested, and there's been a lot of disputes before of conflict and destabilization that arose as a result of the failure to implement human rights standards. So defend human rights, defend civic space, ensure that the standards between human rights standards, electoral standards, and practices are guarded. So that's my advice.
Right now, the region is confronting three main dictatorships, Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua, as you mentioned. What will you say about the perspective of these dictatorships that are trying to destroy the democratic institutions, they're trying to co-opt the democratic institutions, and they're using election or even the tools of democracy to, if I'm allowed to say it, go against their own citizens? What's your perspective about it?
Yeah, I think it's a global concern. It's a big global concern. And because of the fact that some of the strong nations to continue putting pressure on the powerful nations and on those autocratic nations that we will not compromise on human rights standards.
One last question, sorry, will be about the financing of democracy. We understand that democracy is expensive and need a lot of resources. In a recent future where governments are taking out funds for democracy, do you think it's sustainable in the future if governments start to put resources out to finance institutions that are responsible to make elections around the world?
No. I think it's very dangerous. Dangerous in terms of national stability, in terms of threat to democracy, because of the fact that democracy creates conditions for sustainable development, for sustainable economic growth, for sustainable social cohesion, minimum conditions under which human beings must grow and must develop. So my thinking is that the taking away of funding and resources on democracy is investing in long-term instability and potential long-term conflict in our societies.
Our last question will be, can you share a message for all the Colombian people about the value of democracy and why Colombia need to fight to defend our democratic regime?
You see, the thing is that great society that it is already. We came here, we saw beautiful country. Let's defend it.